We have a couple of things that we're going to do very, very quickly. And Randy will probably have to move the camera for this one as well here in just a second, all right? We have one of our budding young stars who is learning to play the piano. And Miss Delaney, are you ready? This is Delaney Tummy, ladies and gentlemen. Let's make her welcome tonight. Can we do that? Adventure Alley, and one other presentation that we had this evening is a few weeks ago. We had some folks that were baptized here at Cross Point, and we're so excited about that. And tonight we're going to share with Ashley Bales her baptism certificate. So Ashley, here is your certificate. Tell Jack I had this for Sunday. All right, Jack is the other one that was baptized, and we have his, and he is in the youth group tonight. Thank you all for moving in here. I hope before you leave this evening that you'll poke your head inside the sanctuary and see all the changes that have taken place over the last little bit. More will be unveiled Sunday and as the weeks progress in there, but I want to thank Matt Smith and his company. They have done an absolutely beautiful job for us in there, getting the technology studio and everything ready for us going into 2021. And so we just thank the Lord for all that has gone along and will continue to go on as well. Tonight we're going to start a brand new series. I talked to you a few weeks ago how God was kind of winding us down to where we were. But what we're looking at now is we're going to begin studying through the book of Luke. And we will start in Luke chapter 1 tonight, a portion of that. And this study will probably take us up until July or August to finish. All right? So we're going to be walking our way through Luke, and it's the title of it is Encountering Jesus. Because when you look at the Gospel of Luke, you begin to see exactly what Luke was trying to get people to see. And what Luke wanted people to see and wanted people to understand was an encounter with Jesus. And so as we begin to walk through this, I hope as you read the book of Luke, as you begin to walk through that, you too will encounter Jesus. And what more fitting time to begin this kind of an extended study through Luke at Christmas time. Because when you begin to see how Luke begins and all the pieces that are there, it's really fitting for where we are at this particular moment. I hope that you are able to find all of the things that you have needed for Christmas. I know that there is a big lag time for ordering different things, so I hope you started early on all of that as well. But when you begin to think about Christmas, we have a tendency to think of the hustle, we have a tendency to think of the bustle, we have a tendency to think of all the running and the things that we do. But I wonder if Christmas does not lie in not so much the hustle and bustle, but it lies in the quietness and the reflection and the anticipation. That it comes in that quiet moment. Those quiet times when we sit down and begin to watch and wait and listen. And one of the struggles that we have being 21st century people is that when Jesus came, there had been 400 years of silence from God the Father. 400 years since a prophet had spoken on God's behalf. I mean, some of us wonder what we're going to do if our internet goes down for 3 seconds and then we have to reboot it and try to pull everything back up. Something's wrong. Or we pat our foot at the microwave because 30 seconds just takes entirely too long to hear what I mean. Could you imagine being people who live in that intertestamental period, who were waiting on God? Generation after generation after generation came and went. I've been watching a documentary on Netflix on this Challenger. For those of you that know, when I first started school in Florida, I started in January 1986, and it was that month and that year that the Challenger exploded. It was the first shuttle launch I was ever going to get to personally witness, and that was the one that was there. So space has always been something that has intrigued me. And back a long time ago, in 2018, in May, there was a launch that went to Mars, and it was called InSight. And it was going to leave from a place where typically we don't have launches. It was Vandenberg Air Force Base, which is where the shuttles used to land prior to landing them in Florida. And it took off from the west coast of the United States and it headed out to Mars. And it was equipped with a way to dig down into the Martian soil and be able to extract it and really kind of see what is there. This particular craft traveled for 6 months, 300 million miles. And over half of that journey, over half of the journey that it was there, it was impossible to try to figure out how a craft not much bigger around than the tables where you're seated this evening was going to go that far and to get there safely. But it did. And then the real dangerous part began to take place. You say, Bonnie, the 300 million miles wasn't dangerous? Yes, it was, but the most dangerous came after that, and it's when that particular craft had to go through that thin Martian atmosphere and it began to land. And it approached that atmosphere at 12,300 miles an hour. And the heat shield that is on that would heat up to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than Bill's coffee. Yeah. And it would heat up, and it would get to the place to where they would hopefully sit down, because what happens is it had to not only sit down, it had to be doing only 5 miles an hour to sit down, or else it would crash. So imagine going from 12,300 miles an hour to 5. That's what it had to do. But the most terrifying part about that, and some of you, I'll watch you pull into the church parking lot, you're close to that record too. Yeah. The scary part of this is, through all of that process of going into the atmosphere, there is no communication whatsoever with the spacecraft. No. They call it 7 minutes of terror, where they don't know if it's okay, they don't know if it's going to land, they don't know anything that's going on. It's 7 minutes of absolutely no communication whatsoever. And NASA has to land. InSight did land safely. And it has been sending information back. I'll let you know that. But if we think 7 minutes of terror is bad, what about 400 years? And God said nothing. How many of you have ever felt at times, I pray, Pastor, and I listen, and it feels like my prayers bounce off the ceiling? Could you imagine 400 years of that? Could you imagine that the last time God ever spoke was in Malachi chapter 4? And it says, surely the day is coming. See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. And that's the last thing they heard from God. For 400 years. That God would come. That he would send someone that would be like the prophet Elijah to prepare God's people. And that's it. And they waited. And they waited. And they waited. I won't say it was 400 years of terror. I think it was pretty close. Because in those 400 years, things happened. Kingdoms rose, kingdoms fell. Marauders came, people died, viruses came, disease hit, issues happened, things that were terrible happened. Yet, the last thing God told them was, He's coming. He's coming. That's why this season, we call it Advent. And Advent literally means come. Advent helps us prepare. Advent helps us get ready. Advent helps us get to the place to prepare for Christmas by connecting with the reality of waiting. Of silence. And this is where the Gospels come, with the announcement of the Messiah. This is where the Gospels come, and they begin to share what was going on. And it breaks those 400 years of silence. And so we're going to look at Luke over the next few months. We're going to look and see what Luke really has to say and encounter Jesus. And I'm excited about this because I want every one of us, whether we're in this room tonight, we're watching online, or we look at it later on YouTube or any of our other platforms, I hope that you get to the place where you really encounter Jesus. Because that was the reason Luke wrote what he did. He wanted people to understand who Jesus was. And you see, Luke wanted to share the gospel. And the gospel simply means good news, or probably more accurately, the great news. The great news. After 400 years of silence, there's some good news out there. After 400 years of silence, salvation has come. God is here. And Luke comes along, and he begins to draw on the leadership of the Holy Spirit of God. And he goes and he talks to people. And he gets information from them. Matthew, a disciple of Jesus, a tax collector, he shared one of the Gospels. John, the beloved disciple, mentioned in the fourth Gospel. Mark, the secretary of the disciple Peter. And Luke, that guy that hung out with the Apostle Paul. Here's how he starts. He says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Therefore, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, it seemed good also to me to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. so that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. Let's talk about the Gospel of Luke. Let's talk about Luke just a little bit. The author was Luke. He was a traveling companion of the Apostle Paul. Luke also wrote about the spread of the gospel and the acts of the apostles. He shared all of those things in an intricate way. Luke was a physician. He was a doctor. A distinct discovery and detail, research eyewitnesses. He went all out to talk to people to get their experience with the gospel. 50% of Luke's accounts are beyond that which are included in the other gospels. He wanted to dig in because Luke's audience were not Jews. They didn't grow up understanding what the Messiah was coming. His audience was vastly different. And because his audience was different, he wanted them to understand how people really connected with Jesus and what it means to connect with Jesus. Luke's gospel uniquely includes more personal information about the thoughts and the feelings of the people who were there. It's Luke that says Mary treasured up all of these things and she pondered them in her heart. Luke sat down with Mary and heard, I'm sure, what she had to say with that. And Luke is writing to an educated Gentile, as an educated Gentile, to another individual who is willing to pursue the truth. You know, we've got a lot of people today who will espouse all kinds of things. But it really takes a brave man or woman to pursue the truth. It really takes a brave man or woman who will say, I will find out the truth. I will go look for it. I will go search for it. And time again, there are people who have come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ who initially decided they were going to go look how to refute what Jesus did. And they end up finding him. Luke is a truth seeker. Luke is a truth seeker. Luke is not a simple individual. He is a well-learned man. He is a man that moves along with anticipation to see all that God would have for him to know and to understand. Luke provides us something this Christmas season. He provides us over the next few weeks as we're leading up to Christmas. He provides us with an overview of what God did. He provides us with an overview of what God had to say to the rest of the world. In Luke chapter 1, beginning of verse number 5, it said, in the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zachariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were upright in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and regulations blamelessly. But they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well along in years. He begins with two major contrasts. He starts with the chief political guy of the day, and then he moves to Elizabeth and Zachariah. You could not be on two opposite ends of the societal spectrum than with these two, Herod and then Zachariah and Elizabeth. These people were vastly different. The world knew of Herod. The Roman Empire knew of Herod. The next town down probably did not know of Zachariah and Elizabeth. Yet these two show a major contrast in what God really comes along to do. Because sometimes we think it's the people that are out there on stage, it's the people that have the big platforms out there, it's the people that we all see and their household names. We think those are the ones that are making the splash. But many times in God's world, it's the exact opposite. Yet, by utilizing Herod, Luke adds authenticity to what he's saying. Because history books will show this. History books will come along and talk about Herod and all the things that were there. Had he only talked about them, it would have been all right. But he added Zechariah. Zechariah was one of the priestly clan. And there was about 20,000 people within the priestly clan. And over their lifetime, they had opportunity to be able to serve in the temple. Typically, it was 2 weeks out of the year. And Zechariah and Elizabeth went to Jerusalem in order to serve from the town where they lived. They did not live in Jerusalem, they lived in Judea, but they did not live in Jerusalem. And so they went to be a part of that. And it was typically only one time in the life of the priestly individuals that they got to burn the incense. One time in their life. And this just happened to be Zechariah's moment. This was his moment to be able to do that. And this was a man who he and his wife, while they were of the priestly class, they were godly people. They did everything according to the law that they should do. But they couldn't have kids. And many in Judaism at that time, if you could not have children, it was God's judgment on you. You sinned so badly. You did something so horrible that God would not let you have children. Yet, so far as Judaism was concerned, Zechariah and Elizabeth were obscure and insignificant people. Yet it's amazing, in God's view, they weren't insignificant. The political icons, in God's view, were the ones who were, I won't say insignificant, but they didn't matter as much as Zechariah and Elizabeth. You see, both of them were upright in the sight of God. Think about that. Being people who were set apart from their peers in a way that others around them paid attention. They were set apart to where others would hear exactly what was going on. Let's go on and look. He said once when Zechariah's division was on duty, he was serving as a priest before God. He was chosen by lot according to the custom of the priesthood to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of the incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard." I believe the best way to describe Zechariah at this moment would be just an old country preacher. He and Elizabeth lived in an obscure part of the world. Twice a week they came and they did what they were called to do. And on this particular day, an angel of the Lord stood there beside the altar of incense and scared him half to death. Now, I know that we think that back then, everybody was looking for angels, and we all know Michael Landon, was on the highway to heaven, and he was an angel. And do you realize that in our 20th and 21st century culture, we talk way more about angels than they did back then? Way more. When you go back and you look and you see, while they understood angels, they didn't talk about it. 8 out of 10 Americans say that they believe that they have been around angels, they've spent time with angels, an angel has done something, whether it's their guardian angel has taken care of them or something. If you would talk to Zechariah and Elizabeth and their peers at that time, they would say, not that much. That's why anytime that you see in Scripture when an angel of the Lord comes, the response is normally, whoa. The response is normally fear. The response is normally, this is not something I'm really expecting and I'm looking at. Zechariah was startled. And the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid. Your prayer has been heard." So the angel understood that he was afraid. The angel understood that it was something that was really kind of freaky to them. Yet, the prayer that likely remained in their lives would either be, give us a child, or let us see the Messiah when he comes. Luke doesn't go into detail on the exactness of that particular prayer for these two. Yet, he goes on to talk about his unique place in God's plan. And he says in verse 13, your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit from birth. Many of the people of Israel he will bring back to the Lord their God. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and the power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for war. The Hebrew name John literally means Yahweh has been gracious. And so he says he's not merely going to be your son. He's not merely going to be this particular person that you're looking at. He's saying, Zechariah, you're an old guy. You're going to have this. You're going to find this. So what is he hearing? What is Zechariah hearing at this moment? Zechariah is hearing that his hope has been fulfilled. The prophecy of 400 years by Malachi is now going to be fulfilled in his son. He's old. His wife is not of childbearing age at this point anymore. His life is ordinary. His life is routine. His life is just out there doing what God has called him to do. And suddenly, things change. Suddenly things are new. Suddenly things are different. Suddenly things have just gotten a whole lot bigger than Zechariah and Elizabeth process. But you see, that's the way it is at Christmas. With Christmas, it's always about something bigger. It's always about something bigger, about being drawn into something so much bigger that I can even comprehend at times. And whatever our circumstances, whatever is going on in our lives, remember Zechariah and Elizabeth. And remember that there is always something bigger. Let's go on to verse 8. Zechariah asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years. The angel answered, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news, and now you will be silent and unable to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their proper time. This man had been married a long time. Did you notice how he worded this? I'm old, but my wife is well advanced in years. This man understood how to say those things. He really did. Yet, even though he was politically correct in what he said, even though he worded it just right, he asked for a sign and he got one. God wouldn't let him talk. He asked for a sign and God gave him one. He wouldn't let him talk. And, perhaps it was a consequence, a lack of belief on his part. But maybe it was God's way of getting him to be quiet so he could listen. Maybe it was God's way of saying to him, Zechariah, get yourself ready. Zechariah, be ready for what's coming. Zechariah, there's some things happening here that you need to be ready for. And there are times, folks, that God has to remove us from our normal so that we can get ready for what he really has for us. And he goes on. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long inside the temple. When he came out, he could not speak. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. Well, he went home. He had changed that massively, being in the presence of God. And then it said, he went home. In other words, God did something amazing inside of his life, and then God sent him back to where he needed to be. And then that final thing that adds just the icing on the cake. It says, after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant. For 5 months remained in seclusion. The Lord has done this for me, she said. In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people. What a beautiful statement. What a beautiful statement that she shared at that moment. He has come to show his favor. All those years, when people looked at her and wondered, what did you do? What did your husband do? When in reality they had done nothing. Yet God brought them to this place in order to experience that. Can you imagine what it would have been like? Yet she remained in seclusion. What do we find when they left Jerusalem? We find a man in silence and a woman in seclusion. Christ began with space to reflect and to prepare one's heart. How do we look at what Luke has shared with us tonight, going into Christmas? How do we look at what Luke has laid out as we begin this study in the Gospel of Luke? Let me share with you just a few things, and we'll wrap it up this evening. The truths that prepare us to celebrate Christmas. Number one, Christmas is about what is true. Luke made sure Theophilus and us and whoever else would read what the Holy Spirit gave him the task to do. Luke wanted us to know it was true. He carefully investigated. He carefully looked. He wanted to know everything from the very beginning. He wanted to know that what I have been told is true. I want to know that for myself. He was not afraid to go look for it. It was not that he was a skeptic, because many times a skeptic goes in with a preconceived idea, and they try to find evidence to support their position. Luke went in to find out the truth. And so many times, my friends, we don't allow God to come into our lives so that we can see exactly what he has. You see, God intersected with time when Jesus came later on in Luke's Gospel. We'll look at that. But we also need to understand that he intruded into human history. Have you ever had somebody intrude in your house? You ever had somebody just come in and you knew them and you tolerated them, but they just came on in? Maybe it's friends of your kids who have decided that they need to live in your house more than they do their own. Doesn't matter who it may be. God chose to intrude after 400 years of silence. He said, I am now showing up. And Luke wanted to know what was real. Not fairy tales, not fables, not things that are out there, not some idea that has been bantered around by different people. He said, I want to know the truth. You know, when you look at the life of St. Nicholas, it's really kind of amazing how Santa Claus has developed. it is vastly different. It is vastly different. And Luke wanted to make sure that the modern concept of Santa Claus was not what he was getting when it came to talking about Jesus. He wanted to know the truth. And as the children of God, we need to make sure that what we're looking for and what we're seeking after is the truth of who Jesus is. That's why the series is called Encountering Jesus. Going after Jesus to know exactly who he is. Second thing tonight is that Christmas is not what popular culture tells us is important. It is about what humanity actually needs. It's not what our culture tells us is important all the time. It's what we truly, truly need. If we want to prepare ourselves for Christmas, we have to decide who defines what's really important. We have to decide who defines what is truly important. We may have to give a little less weight to the mass of popular news and political press and all the cycles and the things that are out there. If we really want to take in the good news of who Jesus is. Number 3. Christmas is best received by the waiting that precedes the coming. So even right now in Luke chapter 1, they're still in the waiting. The Christ child hasn't come. They're still in that waiting moment. And Christmas can be best received by the waiting that precedes the coming. Christmas, waiting is the exact opposite of what our society says Christmas really is. Waiting is the opposite of what we want. Society says rush, get busy. Yet God said, wait. As we are looking through Advent, and we are processing what it means to be a part of who God has called us and made us to be, we should have a spirit of anticipation that the best things that God desires to do in each and every one of us are yet to come. The best things that God has to do inside of our lives are yet to come. The spirit of waiting and hoping is at the heart of the beginning of Luke's gospel. And it is at the beginning of Advent, which is where we are right now, looking at the things of God. It's a reminder of the separation from God because of sin. That Jesus came near to us. And that's what Luke shares with us. That's what gets us ready. And it's that coming near that allows us to have the relationship with Him that He wants with us. That long-awaited hope that has taken a little while to experience. It's not been 400 years for us. But wait. Wait and see what Luke unpacks for us as we go through the gospel. Wait and see what he unpacks for us. There'll be some amazing things to find as we